I'll just talk a little bit about myself. I trained with a man I regard as a genius. His name was Moshe Feldenkrais. He had a theory about how to improve brain functioning. And we demonstrate that the theory is useful by helping kids with cerebral palsy move better, or people recovering from strokes, or people with ordinary back problems. It's all about how the motor system of the brain organizes body movement. But the theory can be generalized to any skilled behavior, to improving any skilled behavior. And I've applied it to psychotherapy on the one hand, creativity training, and now I apply it to large-scale social change. And really it's all about mindset change. And of course, you may know one of the great pioneers in articulating that was Donella Meadow. So changing people's thinking is at a really different level than campaigns or protests. I think it's about helping people think more realistically about our current situation and more comprehensively. People need to grasp, I believe, the big picture and therefore know why we need rapid transformative change. Donella wrote a famous essay called Leverage Points, Places to Intervene in a System. And she said the most influential levels are in people's, she called paradigms, we could also call it mindsets, I think, and also the goals of the system. So these high-level goals are at a very different level than the practical ones that most people focus on. It's the hardest to influence, perhaps, but also most influential because so much follows from our ways of thinking. The goals of the system, the predominant goal for our current globalized system is economic growth, as I'm sure you know. But let's make a connection here. Annie Litter did a wonderful video called The Story of Stuff, and she said, the more stuff, the more CO2, the more environmental damage. And then she linked it, as I do, to economic growth. Economic growth thrives on, requires ever-increased manufacturing, more stuff. Or so I imagine. Let's just pause a moment. Quick responses to that idea. Is economic growth actually a driver of our destruction? I see nods. Okay.
Hi, I can give it a try. In my home country, in Colombia, the Secretary of Energy dared to challenge the European countries to establish degrowth policies. He was misunderstood, and there was a public outcry in Colombia, 50 million inhabitants, because presumably she was talking about degrowth in Colombia when 40% of the people remain poor. So limits to growth, to use the term employed by the Club of Rome, obviously impact upon every single society. But there are some where no growth has left people behind. So how to balance that act, I believe, is a challenge.
Quite so. So I think that the challenge is for the prosperous, industrialized folks to come to terms with reality, even as people who are so impoverished get a little more benefit to them. Let me come back to screen share. I like to show this cartoon. Some of you may have seen it. To me, it really sums up our industrial economic system. But things are actually worse. This version of it added some atomic weapons. So this is a situation we're dealing with currently, and why I presume we're all here. We all care about this stuff. I think given such a complex problem, wicked problem, whatever we call it, no simple solutions, no silver bullets. It helps to have a positive goal. One framing for such a goal that some people use is to transition to a life-affirming culture, one that cares for people and the planet. Indicatively, that's things like this crude diagram, but it's one I pulled together. More generally, it's a life-affirming culture, an umbrella term for all the myriad of good things that are already going on. So better child rearing, renewable energy, better agricultural systems, all are contributions to what we might call a life-affirming culture. Sorry. So another quick question. How does the goal of transitioning to a life-affirming culture land with each of you?
It lands deeply to move from more focus on things and acquiring stuff to sustainability and providing adequate livelihoods for everybody. That's life affirming.
Tie this question back to your other question about growth. I don't think the problem is growth. I think the problem is bad growth. And that actually what we want is good growth. So, for example, the growth of a life affirming culture is good growth. And I think it's really important to look at the forces that are moving us in the right direction with as much attention and awareness as we look at the forces that are moving us in the wrong direction. And, you know, the most powerful thing I think we can do is to encourage the forces that are moving us in a good direction toward a life-affirming culture.
I'm in great agreement with you to a degree, James. That's why I show the mosaic of practical action. We need to amplify all those good things that are going on, but not to debate it here. But the question I would leave you is it true that devotion to economic growth as it currently operates tend to increase environmental destruction? But let's let it go for now.
Okay.
So here's a conundrum as I see it. We had a federal election recently in Australia, and one of the first things the Prime Minister did in a climate election was to say, we will not limit fossil fuel exports because we cannot take the economic hit. And personally, I thought his position was valid. The Australian population is not prepared for that. I take it that the Chilean population may not be as well. Indeed, it's global. But we have the conundrum between the tension of ways of living that destroy our environment and the felt desirability of increasing economic prosperity. And it's a conundrum, no simple solution. I think, however, that for a leader to get any traction saying, folks, we need to slow the economy to preserve our life support systems, they need prior public support. Without it, a really realistic leader will be shouted down or ignored. Or so I think. Which leads to the fundamental question, how might we reach the mainstream? How can we affect public attitudes? And I think there are a lot of untapped resources, which actually links back to what you were saying, James. There are literally millions of groups that care about environmental and social well-being. A couple of decades back, Paul Hawken wrote a book about that called Blessed Unrest. They're an enormous number and it's growing. There's also a group of people that social researchers call cultural creators. These are people like us, I presume, who are not overly concerned with our own economic prosperity, want to do well, yes, but we'd rather spend time on family, friends, have low-stress jobs, and indeed care about the environment, contribute to the society as a whole. So these are resources. We already exist. So I have a vision of a social change movement that has two elements. At the heart of it is the idea of people talking with people they know about the things we're talking about here, our existential emergency and the systemic changes we need to have some hope of a positive future for coming generations. And the point of the conversations, I imagine, is to prepare the ground mentally across the culture so that when leaders do arise who have a realistic vision, they'll have public support. Of course, this goes with the actual practical on-the-ground work that we mentioned already, better agriculture and so forth. I think personal conversations are our most effective tool, provided we can take it to scale. I coined a phrase, evolutionary catalysts, for people who carry out such conversations. We could also call ourselves citizen educators. And I developed a tool, well, before I get to the tool, with the idea of face-to-face conversations. Of course, we can imagine thought leaders championing the goal, but also more importantly, almost, or equally importantly, urging people to act as evolutionary catalysts. What I observe among the sustainability leaders that I happen to come across, and I scan a lot, as I imagine you guys do, is they're all fonts of knowledge. I don't see anybody asking ordinary people to step up to leadership. So that's a big part of our theme today. As I mentioned, I set up Inspiring Transition. It's a platform to support evolutionary catalysts. One of our, let me come out of it. I developed a tool for conversations. It's called Kitchen Table Conversation. This is the beer coasters model. It's a set of labels on beer coasters to have a conversation on the topic, what factors in the way our society operates tend to make CO2 emissions and other environmental damage worse. So it starts with that link I showed you earlier. The physical model looks like this. I won't go through it in detail, but we lay out these 4 cards and say more stuff, more damage. What makes stuff go up? People say things like advertising, then I bring in the other ones. So it's a tool. I came across this. There are other descriptions of roles for social activists. I suggest we add a new role, which is evolutionary catalysts, people who help people think better about this and also function better emotionally, coming back to, not sure, somebody talked about the emotional side a bit, it's important. We're forming a league of evolutionary catalysts, an informal group, but those of us who are committed to communicating to shift the culture in the ways I've just been talking about. And I'd be thrilled if each of you, on review, decided to become active in this.